you can't pursue quality time to the detriment of quantity time. It's actually the quantity time that opens up the avenue for quality time. You just need to be with people. Mm-hmm. You need to put it in that time first, just being around each other, just living life together. And then it's within that quantity time that you find those moments of real connection.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes in terms of parish life. We've both worked in parish capacities before, and you're thinking like, why does it work sometimes with some groups of people and then with other groups of people or other programs or whatever? It just doesn't work. And I remember realizing at one point that, and I mean, this isn't the end all be all for parish life, but just that quantity time, non-program time is absolutely necessary to building vulnerability and friendship. Yeah. You can't just have 60 women show up at the Bible study each week and expect that they're going to have meaningful, deep relationships that are going to go into their regular life, because at the Bible study, you come with your best and you come on game and you do your homework, and that's not reality. You get a little scared letting people in when you're always quality timing it. Right. You need the quantity time. You need showing up at someone's house when they're yelling at their kids or, whatever's going on, where you enter into their reality situation and you love them or they love you in your reality situation.
What's the analogy with that? That scenario that you just kind of walked us through? Yeah.
So as a mom now, I know I talk about this a lot. We have 5 kids. Oldest is not yet 10. I went from having a life of being able to do as much spiritual and liturgical stuff as I possibly could. And I packed it in there and I did all of the things. And I don't regret that at all. Right. But when motherhood, I got a lot of quality time. So now as a mother, I have fewer moments of silence, of quiet. And even when I do have silence and quiet, I'm still like, and I'm sure other mothers can recognize this, like you go to have a quiet mass and you're still just kind of like, you're practically shaking. And it gets you to like the end of your adoration hour and you're like, oh, finally I can be with our Lord. And then you got to go back to the babysitter, and to the chaos. And when I started to give my tiny amounts of time, whether it be in the shower while I'm shampooing, or going to the bathroom because it's the only quiet time I ever have, or something very small, or like, I'm just going to say the Angelus real quick. I'm going to close the door to the bedroom, hope nobody falls off of anything while I'm in there taking this time for prayer. And what I noticed is that when I gave the times of prayer, not always, I began to have an increase in either consolation or mystic encounters with God, where it wasn't just me praying anymore. It was truly like God taking advantage of that tiny sliver of time I have given him. And he gave me a revelation to my personal self, what I needed there in his faithfulness. I spend a lot of quantity time in my vocation, like dripping with kids and husband and dog and house and laundry and cooking and stuff. But God, when I give him those tiny little moments, he's able to make the quantity out of it, because he's another person. Yes. He's another person. This isn't, I hear people say in marriage prep, like, oh, marriage takes 3, like there's 3 people in your marriage and God is one of them. And when I hear that, I think to myself, that's nice symbolism. Like we're kind of we're going to leave room for God, but it's real. He's not a pretend person that I leave a pretend space for at my dinner table. He's a real and active person in our marriage whose voice I can recognize, whose discernment and whose peace is something that is as tangible to me now in our sacrament as you are.
I find this to be such a fecund connection here, a fruitful mental connection between prayer and relationships. And prayer as our relationship with God, because we see so many connections between our struggle, our journey of improving our human relationships, our relationship as a couple, our relationship with our kids, our relationship with family members and friends, with our prayer life, especially if we acknowledge the breadth of that term prayer. I think one thing that we can fall into in our relationship with God is only, again, thinking that prayer, the engaging in this relationship with God, is only one very specific kind of thing, one very specific kind of quality time. Like, it's only if I can go to Mass, or only if I can go to adoration, or only if I'm having this really intense experience of God's presence. Well, no. What we're actually called to as Christians is for, is for those specific instances of liturgical prayer and prayer of the presence of God, that, those moments that God gives us. Those are to spill out, and increasingly our whole life is to be a prayer. In other words, to really live in the presence of the real person of God, no matter what you're doing, so that everything you do is a prayer. I mean, again, taking it back to relationships, sometimes we sit and talk, and sometimes we need to. Sometimes we don't need to. Sometimes we just be together. Like sometimes when you go to adoration, sometimes people are intimidated by going to adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. This is a thing for Catholics. We go before the Eucharist, which we believe is Jesus Christ truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity.
The bread at church.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
That's
I want to take it down to the lowest level. After the priest consecrates,
lay it out for us.
We believe that it is Jesus's body, blood, soul, and divinity. So we worship it. We worship him.
And so we have this practice of adoration, which is outside the context of Mass. We go and simply pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament. But some people are intimidated by that, because when they hear, go and pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament, a holy hour, that's what we call it. We go do a holy hour. Well, a whole hour. What am I going to say that whole time? How do I fill up that whole time with talking, especially when God doesn't usually audibly talk back to us? Well, there's the thing is, you don't have to go and say anything. Just go sit and be with God. That's enough. Mm-hmm. And sometimes
because he is another person.
Yes.
And his presence does, when you do that, I did a lot of that in college when I would get off of work at the bar and it'd be really late and I'd be really tired and I'd been on my feet all day. Yeah. And I would just go to the Blessed Sacrament Chapel, and it was close, very, very close to the chair, the tabernacle was. And I would just sit. And over the course of weeks, months, it became really apparent to me, to my senses, that there was another person there. And I didn't do anything but just sit exhausted and maybe say hi, or something like that. I didn't pray, I just sat.
Yeah.
But the actual presence of God became so tangible to me.
When I went through kind of my period of doubt and wrestling with my faith a little bit during my teenage years, my journey ended up being a very intellectual one. I got into philosophy, and I wanted to really understand what it meant to have faith in God. I wanted to know, was knowing that God exists, was that a point of faith, or is that something we can come to know through our reason to be sure about? So many questions around that. So it ended up being a very intellectual journey. And the intellectual journey led me all the way up to the edge of faith in Christ. I really came to believe through my reason, through my exploration of the world and of my life and of the reasons of the nature of the universe, that God existed and that Jesus had existed and that he had claimed to be God, and that he had formed this church, and this church had persisted through the centuries and in many miraculous ways, and now was presented to me, and led me all the way up to that edge of but then can I put my faith in this person, Jesus Christ? And the last leg of that journey for me was simply many hours spent sitting with Jesus in the chapel, just being with God. And again, I wasn't sure if I knew how to pray. I was still trying to figure that out. What does it mean to have a relationship with this God? Sometimes I would use words, but sometimes I would just be with God. And that's how I came to know God. I came to have a relationship with God. I came to have the sense of God's presence and as an active, dynamic person in my life. But again, taking it back to relationships, the quality and quantity time stuff. How do you get to know people? Sometimes if we put too high of a premium on this quality time with people, we don't put in the quantity time, just being with them, just sharing life with them. I think I do this with the kids a lot. I want to sit down and have a profound conversation with them. I have something I want to teach you about, son, and he's just not there for it, because up to that point in the day, we've been fussy and I haven't been listening to him, and we haven't been spending time together. And now I'm expecting to suddenly have, this perfect quality time with him. Mm-hmm. It's silly. No, I need to put in the time of just being with him, having fun with him, laughing with him. And it's in the context of that quantity time as a family that we have these moments, where the kid sort of reveals his or her heart to you or something like that. I think that teaches us a lot about our spiritual life with God.